So people have been leaving messages on walls for a very, very long time. In fact, not too long ago, in France, they found a cave that had a handprint on the wall, and they thought it was about 30,000 years old. And according to them, that was the oldest handprint of its kind, until in Peru, they found one that was 50,000 years old. But I want to talk about graffiti and kind of how it's evolved over the last 100 years. Graffiti is actually borrowed from the Italian word graffiato, which means scratched. And one of the first findings of scratched graffiti in the US was someone was going around to boxcars, like train boxcars and latrines, and they were carving a little face with a couple of eyes, a little mouth, a cowboy hat, and a cigarette with puffs of smoke. And his name was Bozo Texino. And no one had any idea what Bozo Texino was all about. However, homeless people clued in really quick. Whenever they saw Bozo Texino, it was a safe place for them to stay. Fast forward to the Second World War, someone was taking regular house paint in the US, and they were painting a straight line with a big nose hanging down, a head on top with a couple of eyes, a tuft of hair, and a bunch of fingers, as if someone was looking over a wall and their nose was hanging down. However, they would write, "Kilroy was here." And no one had any idea who Kilroy was. And as I said, it was very interesting that this was happening during the Second World War. Well, the enemies of the United States found out about Kilroy is here, and they said, oh, this must be some sort of military code. We need to get to the bottom of this. And the American military said, awesome, paint it everywhere. And they did. So the army went out and painted Kilroy was here all over the place, literally to thwart our enemies. It was all misinformation, had nothing to do with anything. A lot of people associate graffiti with music, specifically hip-hop culture. However, the first marriage of music with graffiti was punk rock culture. In the mid-70s, New York basically went bankrupt. The American government basically said, you're on your own. And so they were in serious trouble. Crime was all over the place. People were in severe poverty. However, whenever something really bad happens, usually something good comes out of it. And the good that came out of it was art, graffiti. All of a sudden, blank walls and blank subway cars became canvases for graffiti artists. A lot of people also associate graffiti with gang violence, specifically tagging. Murals, are they graffiti? They are street art. I'm not sure they're graffiti. Usually, murals are commissioned pieces, so they're actually paid for. If you have permission from the building, then it's legal. If you do not, then it's illegal.
Being a street artist is so many different jobs all at the same time, depending on the place in the project that I'm at and also the different projects that I work on. So sometimes it's painting, sometimes it's engaging with community members, sometimes it's designing, sometimes it's problem solving. I've been getting clients in a lot of different ways. When I first started out, I was making art mostly for myself, not art that was commissioned. And then as I started building my portfolio, people started reaching out to me, seeing works that I had done and being excited by that style and wanting to see something on their property or in their office or on the back of their building in a similar style. I guess I've been an artist my whole life. I just was always drawn to the act of creating and turning things into different things or nothing into something. And that's been with me since I can remember. I started doing street art while I was in university. I studied graphic design. I was really interested in the idea of spreading a message that wasn't an advertising message and was just a message that could make people feel good and make people feel like the place that they were was a place where they belonged. So that's how I painted my first ever outdoor art piece. And then it was a really slow build, truthfully, from there to actually doing it as a job. I didn't really know any adults who were artists when I was a kid, and so it didn't seem like something that you could actually do as your job. And so then as an adult, when I had this desire to make this my job, it was so helpful to know other people who had been doing it for some time, to be able to ask them, like, how do you do this? And really like technical questions, like, where do you buy your paint? What kind of paint do you use? Like, how do you make sure that it's gonna last a long time? I think since I started painting, I've learned so much more about the history of street art in Toronto. Specifically that there's really different communities of people who were practicing at the same time in totally different ways. Now, within street art in Toronto, that the people who get to participate is really expanding. And that feels really exciting to see that it's a growing group of people who have really different messages to share. And that feels extra exciting because the more people who have an opportunity to share their personal journey or story or vision on the streets, the more likely it is that even more people will see themselves represented on the streets. And I think that's one of the ways that we can start building a city where everybody feels that they belong. I think that street art is so many different things. It would be impossible to say it's always this or it's always that. I think for me, I feel quite a sense of responsibility and privilege that I have the opportunity to make things that tons of people see, and I want to do that in a way that I'm always thinking about who's going to see it and how it's going to make them feel. And so I think in that way, I think about my practice as something that prioritizes engagement because I want to feel like I'm contributing something that enriches people's lives.
When Rob Ford was our mayor, he decided he was going to declare war on graffiti. What would happen is Rob Ford and his crew would go out there and they would see the graffiti on your garage door. They wouldn't ring your doorbell, they wouldn't knock on your door, they would simply put a notice on your garage door that says, by law of the City of Toronto, you have 72 hours to remove this graffiti. Otherwise, you will be fined by the City of Toronto and we will remove the graffiti for you and bill you for it. Elixir, the one with Kevin Leto, they realized if we put a mural on the wall, people will leave us alone. If there's a mural on the wall, people don't tag or bomb, they leave it alone because it's nice, right? So these buildings started looking up on the internet. Uber 5000, Elixir, Kevin Leto. Hey, I love your art, come do art on my wall. So they would come down, 5 grand, 10 grand, 15 grand, which gives you an idea of how bad these fines were. And the mural goes on the wall. So then Rob Ford comes and says, you gotta get rid of the mural. And they're like, no. No. This is commissioned art. I have paid for this. Here's my receipt, get lost. Ford unfortunately passed away before his term was up as mayor from rare form of stomach cancer. And when he did, the war on graffiti went away because City Council said, wow, that was a really bad idea. There's actually more graffiti in Toronto now than there was before. People in Toronto like graffiti. So what they ended up doing was they created something called Street Art Toronto, which is a grant you can actually apply for to get the money for scaffolding and paint to do murals in Toronto. And if Rob Ford knew that was around, he'd be pretty pissed off.
the contributions that I feel the most proud of are things that I've done with a lot of other artists. So I organized this event called Women Paint, and over the last 5 years through this initiative, I've produced 100 murals by women and non-binary artists in different locations around the city. And I would say that I'm really proud of that work, both because the murals are beautiful and powerful and uplifting and inspiring, and they share these really strong messages of hope and connection and resilience and power. I feel really filled up by the fact that I could help create a space for other people to meet each other, to have these exchanges, collaborations, and learning opportunities. So that perhaps is one of the things I'm the most proud of. I was inspired by other events that I had participated in where lots of artists would get together at the same time, but all of the events that I had participated in were mostly men and some women, and I had this desire to have a community of women to paint with, and I wasn't sure where to find it, so I made it. If I had to pick one thing that I liked the most, it's that every single time that I have a job, it's something totally different. And because I'm always doing different things, I'm always learning and I'm always growing. For a long time, I felt like I had to be a different person in order to be an adult. Like I had to be more serious and less playful and less colorful and less loud, and just like I felt like I had to tone everything down. And I absolutely love that I have found a way to be me that other people find meaning in, that like I can show up and be a grown child, and that the world says we need more of that.